thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to a wonderful conversation. And thank you, Madame la Présidente, for being with us. Let's get straight into it. It feels like with global climate goals now needing trillions and trillions of dollars in new investments, that multilateral development banks have to do more with perhaps less. How is the EBRD faring in the current moment?
So we are clearly a growing bank. So we are well capitalized. We got additional support from our shareholders in the form of the capital increase, which has been decided a few years ago, in particular in relation to our activity on Ukraine. But we are optimizing the resources we have in the form of our capital in order to increase our activity and our investment in the countries in which we work. We are also enlarging the scope of countries in which we work, enlarging our geography, because we are just starting investing in sub-Saharan African countries, in 6 new countries, and Iraq. So we are really stretching our balance sheet and stretching our capacity in order to provide investment, and we focus very much on the private sector. The bank mandate is to support the private sector, so 75% of our investments are in the private sector in different forms, from SMEs to foreign investment and so forth, and each country has its challenges, its priority, but we are very much there to support their growth and development.
You have very concrete challenges as to what to supply and where to send your capital, particularly at a time when we're seeing wars. You're very active in Ukraine. How do you decide how to balance your mandate to, support cleaner energy and the transition, as well as those countries that need it most?
So we are very much demand-driven. Being private sector, we really work first on the demand of our clients and what they need, what kind of project they want us to support and to finance. But we also have broad priorities in terms of allocation of capital between the most advanced countries we support, the least advanced countries, because we work from countries like very different scope between Poland or Baltic countries to now sub-Saharan African countries. So we try to have a sort of overall allocation of resources and capital in terms of preserving, ensuring that we have the right focus on the countries that need us most. And one of our very important criteria for investment is additionality. So we finance projects where we believe that we provide something that others, the private sector, private banks, could not provide, so where we are really additional. That's a key driving element for us, as well as a demand. And we have some sort of strategic priorities, which are supporting the green transition and the energy security, greening of the economies and so forth, supporting good economic governance, so transformation of the countries and the business environment in which we work in order to facilitate private sector investment, to have an environment which is conducive to growth and job creation and investment, and also inclusion. Women participation to labor market is a big challenge in a number of countries in which we work. So this is a focus. We have human capital. And in a country like Ukraine, for example, we invest a lot in energy security, keeping the basic infrastructure running, but also a lot in human capital, because helping people coming back from war or to reintegrate labor market or businesses to deal with the challenges in the labor market, mobilization needs and so forth, is a big challenge. So this is something where we are quite active.
Can I ask you about ODAs, the official development assistance that you get? How do you continue to replenish in an era where it does feel like there's palpable backlash, particularly when it comes to the climate agenda from some countries? And if I can add on to that, how much is the US a barrier right now?
So we are not, as a multilateral development bank, we do not depend directly too much on ODA. We have our capital, we invest, the investment generates revenues. This helps us. We do not distribute dividends to the shareholders, but the revenues, the benefits we have allow us to increase our capital, to build up reserve, to increase our financing capacity, and part of it is allocated to subsidies to prepare projects and so forth. But we have donor funding also from bilateral or international organizations like the EU. So this is an important element, and this part is indeed related to ODA, but we don't have a big fund like IDA or African Development Fund to generate concessional funding at scale, because we are private sector, so we work on the condition of the market. This being said, for a number of activities, we need this donor support. For example, to finance project preparation, to finance project where the risk is too high for us and we need some kind of guarantees or risk sharing with donors, donor funding. And this is still working quite well. We managed to get some important donor support, I think, because the impact we can show, the leverage of the funding, for each euro we are provided, we can show a big important leverage. But this is likely to become, I think, a challenge. And we need to be, I think for me, the key lesson I draw from that is that we need to be very thoughtful about where we allocate these scarce concessional resources, to be sure that we allocate where they're most needed, where they are really additional, and do not use them, really target them in the most efficient manner possible.
Yeah. So in other words, the economic case has to be made as well in a lot of these instances. Can I ask you about the Bill Gates letter? Because it created quite the shockwave, I think, in the economy, where Bill Gates was saying there is a certain amount of money, and at this point we need to maybe pull back some of that money from climate in order to make sure that particularly children's welfare is taken care of. What did you think when you read that argument?
I think it's a bit simplistic, because in a way, of course, you have some trade-off and you have to allocate some scarce resources in the most efficient manner. I think when you think about impact of natural disaster, impact of heating waves on healthcare and so forth. You have this is not unrelated. So what's going on the environment, pollution, increase of temperature, increase of floods and so forth. This has a huge impact also on health. So I think that it's not one or the other. We need to find ways to support both. But as I was saying, we need also to rely more, and to use these very scarce resources in a very efficient manner. When we can bring the private sector, when there is no need for concessional funding, we can go for, pure market funding. And I think the good news, in a way, is that in the mitigation agenda, for example, to support green transition, reduce emission and so forth, there is such a big progress in terms of price, in terms of affordability, in terms of competitiveness, that this is, allows to develop market approach, merchant approach, without any, which facilitate the deployment of these new energy sources, contributing to energy security, but also at a low cost and much lower cost than 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So I think this technological transition, which is really taking place at a rapid space is facilitating this kind of trade-off.
We talk about Baku to Belém and the roadmap that we hope will get fleshed out during this COP. Have you any suggestions for how that might happen? After all, $1.3 trillion does sound like a lot of money, but as we heard from Bloomberg NEF, 1.4 trillion was spent just cleaning up natural disasters and climate-related disasters last year alone.
So indeed, no, it looks a lot of money, but indeed not doing anything and not investing in this area would cost a lot also. What I think is important is that there is a very broad range of contribution to, from local investment, domestic market, government funding their own investment, developing and emerging countries financing their own investment, to MDB's role, to private sector. So I think the key element for me to be successful in this area is partnership, to work together and to combine and to have a clear strategic vision, strategic objective, clear policy framework at the country level. That I think is absolutely key to bring the different partners from MDBs to private sector together and know where they can invest, what are the opportunities, and facilitate investment. And that's where how we will make progress. So in a way, we have to liaise between this, what appears as this very big figure, very aspirational, and what we can do on the ground, project by project, country by by country to support the right level of investment, working with partners in the public sector, but also in the private sector, because a lot of work we are doing, for example, in the bank, is working, and it's very closely related to the previous speaker you had, which is working with business partners in the manufacturing sector, agribusiness, to facilitate, to help them invest in decarbonization, more energy efficiency, and so forth. And there you also have clearly a business case. You need to find the right solution. Sometimes you need to increase the awareness of the small businesses, for example, about the opportunities they may find and the technologies they may find in the market, allowing them to be more efficient, to save, to be more competitive in the way they use energy, and then be able to sell, to export, and to develop their businesses. So I think it's, I mean, the link, very often we speak about this big aspiration, in COP in particular, we speak about this big aspiration, but also looking at very concrete, positive projects that are developed and can be scaled up in order to bring progress in the world and for people.
And indeed, you do a huge amount of work with small and medium-sized enterprises in all of these countries. You mentioned before that you've been able to bring on some insurers, and that has helped with risk sharing and so on. How do you bring on pension funds and more long-term money? How do you attract those so that perhaps you can get involved in bigger ticket items?
Yes, so mobilizing private sector is one of our top priorities. First of all, we invest in the private sector, but we also want more share some of our investment with more private sector investors. And for that, we use a multiplicity of sort of instrument, from traditional A/B loans, where we have institutions co-investing with us, to unfunded risk participation with the insurers who are looking for diversification of risk, interested in taking some risk on emerging market and developing countries. We are working also on market transaction for securitization, and we do that, all MDBs working together in order to really learn from each other, but also, build a market where you have, different MDBs offering different or similar type of product to the market. Pension funds are a very important partner for us. We work, for example, with a partner ILX, who is a fund gathering funding from pension fund, in particular in European countries like Netherlands, Nordic countries. Pension funds are very interested in long-term sustainability impact investment. And this fund, built upon pension fund, with an allocation of resources from pension fund, is co-investing with us through B loans in a number of projects in emerging markets. And it can be from projects in Turkey, but also in Uzbekistan, in Egypt. So quite a wide range of countries with different level of risk. And it's, I think, a very efficient way, because it's for the pension fund, it's a very small allocation of their own investment, but bring them impact. And I think it's for their pensioners, it's also a way to bring value. So yes, that's a scheme, a kind of theme we would be happy to expand.
And I know you've been doing a lot of work on risk assessment, which is particularly important because, as you found, some of these projects aren't quite as risky perhaps as some investors would think, or as maybe the perception is.
Yes, so there have been a lot of work on that. And in particular, we, with other MDBs, published our data on risk of default, recovery in case of default, and so forth, which is called the GEMS database. And I think it gives a very interesting picture, because it shows that on the investment we are doing in the private sector, the level of default, the level of risk is much smaller than the general risk perception. And we had yesterday an interesting roundtable where Standard & Poor's were participating, and they were saying that for them this database and this data, and the more granular data we can bring, the better it is helpful to reassess the risk. And they updated their methodology in order to take into account the fact that project prepared by MDBs, which benefit also from the sort of preferred creditor status because of MDB participation, are, really less risky than the general perception can be, and then it unlocked a lot of potential capital from investment according to their methodology. So this is something we need to continue to work upon in order to increase our capacity to fund and also to, more importantly, to attract more private investors together with us.
Yes. Now, I know that you are going to give us some announcements on maybe country platforms at COP30. I don't know if you can give us a little preview today, perhaps not. Either way, what is your best hope for this particular COP?
So I think developing country platform is very important because, as I was saying, the policy environment, a strategic commitment from a country to do this, to commit to some objective, have a clarity on what is long-term, medium-term, long-term investment plan in the energy sector, for example, or in the water sector. This is very important to drive investors. It's also a very effective tool to coordinate within the government. You know, sometimes you have Ministry of Finance, of Equipment, of Energy, having a joint view, very clear, and bringing together all MDBs and bringing together the private sector is the best way, I think, to deliver results. We've been doing that with a number of countries already in Egypt, North Macedonia, Turkey, and we hope to be able to deploy this model. And I think this will be one of the outcome of this COP, to have more of this type of approach, as well as, I think, a further focus on resilience and adaptation, and moving globally from commitment to implementation.
Well, thank you so much, Madame la Présidente. I wish you a very successful COP30 with lots more announcements to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.